going to review chapters 13 and 14 together. These both talk about language assessment and instruction in the classroom and how we're going to enhance language and communication. They kind of break it down into more, how do I want to say, less support assessments with kids in need of less support versus more support. We're trying to move away from high functioning or low functioning. So forgive me as I try and fumble my way through that as I try and get that terminology correct. But essentially, various levels of assessment based on a child's needs. And so it's going to look at things like classroom-based models, which would be tier 1 when we're talking about MTSS or RTI, and then tier 2, which would be targeted instruction, but still in the regular education classroom. That's really chapter 13, whereas chapter 14 focuses on those more severe disabilities, where we're probably looking into tier 3, which is special education. And the speech language pathologist can be involved in working with kids at any of those levels in your classroom and in a regular education classroom. So chapter 13, first, the goal is describing methods for identifying language and communication difficulties, and then identifying classroom-based methods that can be used, because that's where you're going to be, is the classroom. Your key terms to come back and refer to. You'll hear me turning my notes here. We're going to look first at a teacher perspective, and then we're going to look next at a parent perspective. But why we're even taking some time to review what the book put in there is because we need to ask ourselves, what is the importance of them? What is the importance of the teacher perspective or a parent perspective? And what can it tell us about their role in language assessment intervention? And I think this is a tough area from experience. Sometimes it's easy to fail to listen because you hear people who express concerns, and you might think, no, that's not really a concern. So you kind of almost get desensitized to a parent or a teacher that might actually be telling you something very serious or something you really need to investigate further. And so I think that's the same in any job. The more you do it, the easier it is to get in a routine. But we have to remember consistently the importance of a teacher perspective and what they could be showing us in their examples, and then the parent perspective. So I'm going to give you maybe a minute to read this one, and then I'll flip and give you a minute to read the next one, and we'll move forward. Here's your parent one. I also listed the page numbers for you to go back and reference. Okay, gonna move on. When we look at what is language assessment look like in the classroom, so again, if we're really at those first couple tiers of response to intervention, that this child's on our radar, what are some classroom-based observations that we need to look at closer? because we know that a teacher plays a very important role. So those things that are where there's a language rich environment, we're asking ourselves, can they understand and follow my directions? Can they initiate? Can they ask questions? And can they initiate in interactions with their peers? Can they participate in class discussions? And then just I think the area that most commonly is drawn in is, of course, academics. They're struggling in reading or writing. Then there's the question of, could it be language? But these other things, these top four, are, you know, may very well be indicators before an academic indicator registers for you. And so we want to look for all those things. And if you were to ask someone to come in and do a screening, your speech language pathologist, that's what they would be looking at too. And so those are things you can definitely help us out with. And then another thing we might have you do is fill out a teacher observation form, which you will get good at filling out different forms for different things for different kids. But it's kind of just a guided form that's going to ask you specific questions about different areas. Now, each district might have their own form, or each school might have a form they use, or it might be totally up to you to find, or totally up to someone in your building to find something. So not only would you be filling these out maybe at the request of someone, but let's say a regular education teacher comes to you as a special education teacher and says, I have these concerns. You might want to give them a teacher observation form to see what they're seeing, and what their concerns are. And so I gave you a couple different examples here. This is a more specific one to speech language, but it doesn't mean that you couldn't still give that to a teacher. If that's a concern they're coming to you with, you can still get a little form to get a little bit more information and see if anything jumps out to you. And if it's something you feel like you can help with those first stages of intervention or not. And so, in summary, you can use a teacher observation form yourself to collect data, and you will probably be filling them out as other related service providers are collecting data.